Today we're speaking with Heather Gallagher. She's a dynamic leader for her ability to blend creativity, technology, and humanity into stunning spectacles. With 17 years of experience at Burning Man and a background in producing high-profile events and experiences, Heather's expertise is unparalleled. Leading transformative events and pioneering community building strategies, she has expertise that span across diverse formats, leaving a lasting impression on audiences worldwide. As an integral part of the executive team and founding member of the World Experience Organization, Heather's penchant for creativity, leadership, and consistently delivering unforgettable experiences has made her a one of one in the field of events. Welcome to the Activate Your Audience podcast, Heather.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today.
So good to have you. So we'll kick it right off. Why don't you, if you don't mind, give us a kind of Cliff Notes highlight of your origin story, a bit about how you ended up where you are today in this amazing world of events.
I'll try and keep it concise, but I've definitely had a diverse path to getting where I am today. I started in corporate tech. Actually, I've got a master's in computer science, and I studied that and jumped into enterprise technology for almost a decade, and specialized in telecommunications clients and some like middleware programming. So, um, started in a very traditional environment. Then I discovered Burning Man when I moved to the West Coast and kind of volunteered my way in there. I started by doing some creative projects like photography, photo editing, doing a print calendar project. Actually, it's one of these is behind me on the wall. And because those were fun and easy and nourishing to me, and it was a break from my normal day-to-day job. And then eventually I started to lead tech for Burning Man. I already had a relationship and established a reputation with the organization, and it was a place I could help. Of course, my job there went well beyond technology. As a leader there, part of the executive oversight, budgets, event operations, volunteer development, leadership development, conferences, staff meetings, happy hours, special events. Like being a public speaker. And then I also kept doing all the creative projects on the side to keep myself sane. What a phenomenon! What an amazing thing that was to be a part of.
I bet.
Eventually, after the better part of 20 years, it was time to go. And I looked around and I said, what on earth could be interesting compared to, Burning Man? It's such a singular experience. And I discovered immersive augmented reality.
Hmm.
And so I joined a startup in the Bay Area and I created these breakthrough consumer entertainment and brand activation projects using Microsoft HoloLens and our own proprietary software.
Okay.
uh, just absolutely stunning. And what I learned there was that as a human being, I have this vast creativity and talents in human interaction and spatial understanding and just, creativity abounds. And I've been studying lifelong, practices of personal development and human nature and various philosophical systems. And so my creativity just could no longer be confined to traditional like digital screens, two-dimension tech, or enterprise technology. I kind of had to
Right.
kind of burst out into the human space and engage with people in the multi-sensory 3D environments that we inhabit. Once it became possible, right? So I was like, yay, let's get out of the screens and let's get into immersive technology. And then came the pandemic. Wah, wah. So it became nothing but screens all day long. And then some great adventures in virtual reality and virtual worlds and metaverses and those sorts of things that, of course, got a big boost during that time. Coming out of the pandemic, I also knew people were going to want to get back out of their homes, and I spent 2 years helping to start up a company that produced a monumental immersive art experience. Meant to become sort of a new creative ecosystem for artists. It launched in Las Vegas. I left soon after opening, and the show closed about a month later. Ticket sales couldn't sustain operations, and a whole other drama, which we will not go into right now. Um, Lately, I am tapping into and really driven to craft experiences, multisensory experiences. Like we're multisensory, dynamic human beings, and we can engage with information and experiences with far more than just our eyeballs on screens
Yeah.
or even one or two cents. Um, so I'm comfortable navigating between the physical, humanistic, digital realms. So I'm kind of really interested in interweaving technological elements into in-person events or virtual events and have them all be supported for transformative experiences. As an example, most recently I've been helping somebody um, start up a company focused on immersive music entertainment that's designed
Hmm.
to awaken the music within everyone. So
Okay.
that's my jam. How's that? Was that
I
quick
love
enough?
it. No, I love it. That was, I mean, it's like a mixture of, Silicon Valley meets the New Age meets the Matrix meets all the above in the human experience, which I love. But I want to kind of dive into one area that you started on, which was, and then you kind of went back into, which was like you said, to keep your sanity, you worked within the
Uh-huh.
creative. And there's this world that we live in, especially as like both creative and analytical folks, that a lot of us in the event space seem to be kind of like the producer, director, the creative slash, operator, executioner, and the
Mhm.
designer. Like there is this balance of um, energy giving activities, energy giving things, and then like everything in life, we have to do things that we don't want to do, right? It requires, it's not a bad
Mhm.
thing to do things that are out of our comfort zone, but we also don't want to be stuck doing things that we are, yes, okay at, or maybe even we hate, but we can get done, but not at the expense of doing things that actually liven us up, right? And that actually make us, and our clients and the marketplace more valuable because we're
Mhm.
either super skilled, super passionate, usually both, right? And so, how have you now, because it seems you've been very in tune with that. I'm sure the Burning Man experience had kind of a great,
Yeah.
catalyst or played a role in that. But how do you now play within, again, us being adults, we have to adult and do things that sometimes aren't as enjoyable,
Mhm.
and balancing that work that is required to face resistance, to face discomfort and grow, but also to make sure that your soul and your sanity and your things that give you energy, which are different for everybody, are prioritized. Do you have a best practice and how to, balance that?
Yeah, there's so much there to respond to. I mean, going back to what you said about sort of inputs and outputs, I think that, life is a sine wave. We could honestly spend an entire podcast just talking about that. But and that sometimes you're on intake cycles, learning and studying, and da da da, and sometimes you're on creativity cycles where you're generating, and it's always healthy to fluctuate back and forth between the two. And you said I went into creativity to sort of keep myself sane, but I also went into myself to keep myself sane. So I did ended up doing a lot of philosophical studies, yoga, meditation, a lot of esoteric traditions, which I just love and are kind of universal principles and archetypes, but also help me have a context of that I can sit comfortable in this thing called, being a human in an embodied existence, and then being in something like a Burning Man, which is a crucible for humanity in so many ways, in a place of transformation, but also then to be of service to that, I had to go within and then also weave things into it. I tell people, don't confuse the contents and the container for Burning Man. It takes a
Hmm.
very structured and in certain cases rigid container to make a place where creativity and you know dramatic successes, dramatic failures, and all those things can happen within it. And so sometimes the container itself has to be very, has to hold strong because there's a lot of people who don't want that kind of place to exist. So for
Right.
me, coming back to your question, it's about finding things in every single day, and do I do great? No, it's a practice. Just like living's a practice. Sometimes I'm plugged into the box and I'm working, too many hours, but then there are days when I'll take a break, or I'll just let myself do creative flow. It's extremely helpful. You'll get practice to, like take a day off of all the devices, not have an agenda, not have a to-do list. You'll still get things done, but that's just to kind of flow and see what calls to you. It's amazingly therapeutic. But then it's every day. I enjoy costuming, or I color coordinate my outfits, or just setting the table, rearranging corners of my room, whatever it is where I can find those little wrinkles of creativity and expression and just scratch my itch. Plus, in the professional environments, right? And I'm spending a lot of time these days with pitch decks and storytelling and helping, investors or partners or whoever understand a project and get them on board with it. And just getting into the nuances of the visuals and that kind of storytelling can be a really satisfying creative process if you just embrace it as such.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so if I'm hearing you, I think, you provide a really good reminder of just tapping into even the little things, like you said, setting the table. For me, it's like very guy of me, like I'll eat out of the paper bag, like I'm just trying to get it done, get on
Uh,
it. But enough of those days energetically, even if things are moving, even if there's quote unquote successes, like I will be depleted until I, sit down and strum the guitar or photography, right? Like do something that, or maybe even the little things, sit the table and kind of put together a nice play that will help not only in our human world, but those little things at work too. We are very efficient in the way that we execute as part of teams, as part of startups, and that comes with its pros and cons, right? So I think remembering that just like you do in your normal life, in your personal life, in professional life, remember those moments of where we can maybe chime into these like little nuggets of creativity that don't have to be grandiose. They just have to be something that, again, kind of spark or at least to some extent slow us down, and then for sure maybe create that white space that you speak of.
Well, and that's when sometimes the biggest ahas come rushing in,
Hmm.
is when you stop, sometimes if you're staring at a problem so hard you can't even see it anymore, or if you've just been absorbing information or outputting information, you need to go take a walk or be folding your laundry, and all of a sudden it'll be like, shroom, oh, there's the answer. So yeah,
Yeah.
just like you said, you need to make space sort of for for the ingredients to sort of come together and cook, or to reveal themselves. And often it comes in through a side door when you least expect it and when you're doing something else.
That's so true. That reminds me, who was it? It was one of the Wyden and Kennedy founders that mentioned that, right? Like this idea of, I think it was a story around the Nike, just do it, or one of those like crazy big campaigns. And there was a problem that seemed like an impossible solution that was requiring simplicity, that it wasn't until this moment of like, I don't know, I'm just gonna give it up to the universe, to the ether, to the subconscious, and just let it go, and bam, these ideas come. And we hear countless of these, right? Like how Einstein or how, Beethoven, how they would practice the in-between moments of creating space. And even now, as we think about consumers or experiences, just like, we were saying at the beginning of the call, like with the pandemic, there is almost, albeit a bit more of like, not even subconscious, it is subconscious, but almost an unconscious need from the mass, I think, that hasn't been as, awakened, I guess, to some extent, to just the reality of the dimensions that we interplay in as souls, as intellectual beings, as bodies, as spiritual or intellectual, I should say, emotional, all of the above. Like they still require, and even if they're not aware of it, this sense of connection. And so that's where we come in, oftentimes with whether it's through our technical expertise or both, the philosophical and the spiritual practices, as well as, the work that we do to really kind of bring those experiences in a way that add value to the marketplace and to the individual. And so I'm finding that more and more people, whether it was, CEOs that were now at home and leading companies, or us in the events world, where like a lot of our world kind of stopped as far as work was, right? Now we had to adapt into virtual worlds and sitting in front of screens, and just how much more palpable it was, just this need for obviously connection, but also just the need to, as you said, experience multidimensionally, that we take for granted, even as busy people, the busy New Yorker who's just walking down the street, as much as they may be, sucked into whatever their thing is, there are still sensory situations going on around in Vegas,
And
as you
some
know.
giant rats.
Right.
You got
All
to
the
keep
all of
sharp.
those. And so like, but at the same time you're experiencing these things, whereas if you're in a bubble, if you're at home, or even sometimes in the creative process, if you're in a cycle of, downloading or strategizing, there can be these moments where you look up or you're waking up and you're like, I need some connection. So all of that to say, how have you found within the end consumer, the kind of audience being served, how do they maybe respond, or has there been like any, from your perspective, awareness for them recognizing at a deeper level, or just in their experience, as far as what you can tell, how have they welcomed that kind of experience, maybe post pandemic or just as of recent with kind of the new generation, obviously everything that's been going on, that is different from before? Has that been a thing, or is it more like people are always aware and wanting it? Do you know what I
Y-
mean?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I feel like it was sort of in two categories, where there were those who were just ravenous for human contact and just threw themselves into massive
Experiences.
concerts and
Yeah.
every experience available, and or found ways to get out, you know sooner than recommended. And then I think there were a lot of people who were then very, still to this day, sort of fearful of really being in close proximity with folks. And then there's a swath of people. Did you notice this? Um, I still see today, but for a while after everyone sort of came back out, it almost seemed like people forgot how to like work the systems. Just parking or
Yeah.
letting somebody go ahead of you or talking on their phones like they're the only person in the world or crossing the street on their phone. It's like, come
Playing music
on.
out loud at the restaurant, like nobody's
Right, like
there.
just some like really, and I'm not somebody who ever really wants anybody to put their expression, down. Like I am devoted to radical expression, but I'm not talking on my cell phone in the movie, or whatever. And I feel like maybe it settled down, but there was a big path of time where I was like, man, people really forgot how to be with each other again. Like, and there's a few people who became of age, right? A certain teen demographic and all that, where they've now got this global fear baked into them, as well as some of their normal formative moments were interrupted by this strange circumstance. And so maybe I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have mind missing a couple of years of high school, but that's just in reflection. I mean, I'm sure there's a challenge for those folks to overcome now. So I feel like it kind of depended on the group of people. I do know that people want, more things now that are creating a positive impact in the world, right? They've had time, they've been home, we've been fed the fear of all sorts of channels. We won't even get into all of that. And then now as people come out, they want something with meaning. They want something that's going to give them social connection. They want something that's going to help them maybe make the world a better place, or that's demonstrating a consideration of us as a human species. I mean, not everybody, of course, but that is definitely a trend that people are seeing is it needs to have more meaning. Because first there was just this overflow of everything. I mean, every rock band ever on the planet touring, da da da. I think we've now crested into, okay, what's really going on here? And is this a quality use of my time and connectivity with people? A little bit
Yeah.
more discernment. Yeah.
No, that's for sure. I have noticed, definitely these sort of, and even for me, like I would remember sometimes again back to the silos of creativity, silos of almost extremes, being out in events, just again, sensory overload at the highest level, and then coming back to the creative sort of solo journey, right? Being in these moments of like pondering and thinking and reflection. And in either of those experiences, getting into another one, at least for me, can sometimes be there's like it's not smooth always. It can be, right? And I think maybe as a society, for some of us, it was that. Like as we ventured out or ventured back in, that sort of, I don't know if it relates to the connection piece, but also just, the individual, like the fear. There's definitely the fear idea of it, but back to even, within experiences and events, there was just a lot of I think maybe blending of, okay, here I am as this participant or even a part of the project team. And then once you go back into your sort of like cocoon or in your separate space, there was this familiarity from, those days of say like quarantine or even working from home now, right? Like you're hearing a lot of people who, after working from home, younger demographics having their own, trying to find, for example, your partner. Most people find their partner at work, right? And so when like this younger generation is all working from home and they're single, recent college grads, are like, well, where am I going to find my boo, if it's not at work? So there's all these other dynamics, right? And then for everybody else in different stages, there has been these ups and downs within that. And kind of like spinning it into the next question, I would say with the aspect of community, right?
Hmm.
Building that into Burning Man. Obviously, as you mentioned, with brands and experiences and the consumer demand for more meaningful things, more positive impact building things, how have you, I guess, transferred some of like the maybe influences or learnings from Burning Man when it comes to activating audiences based on community? Because I think that is sometimes the glue that can help us, maneuver these transitions, but also can help brands, build some sort of connection, and can help us, like, if we love what we do, a large part of it is we love seeing people connected. We love messages activating people. I personally love the power of just storytelling and how that can shift ideas from within as well as for
Yeah.
communities for the better. So how have you kind of used those experiences and bake community in?
Yeah, some things, of course, were awake in me before I joined Burning Man, but then, the 10 principles of Burning Man are, hardwired into me at this point and part of how I operate in the world most of the time in most circumstances. A couple of the key tools I use sort of for community building and even, building brand relationships is radical inclusion. Okay, first, one of the main tenets of Burning Man, I was just trained to seek diverse opinions, to make opportunity for people who, if they wanted to contribute something, to try make space for them, at least in a consultative manner, even if we didn't end up taking everybody as ideas, letting people be heard. Planning for a very diverse audience, right? You never know who's going to show up, what their background is, and where they're going to be from in the world, and just planning for that. And also being really interested for me in very humanistic and universal topics, right? Trying to find things that are really going to relate, that a lot of people can relate to across the board, no matter time zone, language, background, and kind of do things that are going to bring people along as opposed to make anybody feel excluded or unwelcome at that party. Another one, of course, that I love is Burning Man's radical self-expression. In case you can't tell, I'm stuck here. I got stuck in that principle, and I won't come out, and I don't think I should have to. Um, and so I try to create, context. Burning Man was creating this massive container for people to have fun, but also to express themselves. I mean, truly one of the last bastions of, and celebrations of human creativity and expression. What a precious thing, what a precious thing, right? And when we can create micro, versions of that where people can have fun and express themselves and give them permission and encouragement to do that. From a very young age, we're told, write like this, do this, dress that, be that, doctor, lawyer, fireman, whatever. And we've kind of, as we grow up, unfortunately, we forget how to play and that we can color outside the lines. It's just a crayon on a piece of paper, everybody. Like, don't panic. So I think it's very important to do that because everybody wants to be a part of the story, right? So people like to
Yeah.
co-create. They develop a closer relationship with an experience or a brand or each other when they're an active participant and a contributor and are helping to author or have some autonomy and have some sort of agency within an experience, just like a choose your own adventure, video game or all sorts of immersive entertainment experiences or even weird books where you pick a different, chapter and skip around. But it means so much more for somebody if they're part of the party, part of the story, right? And contributing to it, and then they take ownership of it and they feel like they belong. And it's so that way you're making people not just participate, not consumers, but participants. And it touches them in a deep, deep, deep manner when now they feel like they're on the other side of the velvet rope, if you will, right?
Yeah. No, that makes
Um,
absolute sense. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and then one other one that's definitely important for all kinds of experiences and any kind of narrative or transformative is communal effort, which is another Burning Man principle. I've seen through pandemic and highs and lows and all the resilience that comes from being in community
Yeah.
and the value of shared experiences. When people have the opportunity to work together to solve a problem or overcome, something that needs to be overcome, like the struggle, like a real struggle, like an actual, varying degrees of real struggle and real challenge. If people come at it together, they bond together as a community. It gets them outside of themselves often, and they start to maybe be part of, something for a bigger picture. And that forms really lasting impressions and lasting connections is when people, when they have to reach inside themselves and have a micro little moment of transformation, that's going to release them and release things within them that's going to have make them have a much more powerful experience and community together. How those for a couple?
No, I love that. And I mean, back to, I think the two things that stand out for me in that is just, as you mentioned, people want to be involved in stories. We all are loving of, we're story loving creatures, right? The story is what moves everything in some aspect. And so, of course, why wouldn't we all want to include or be included in a story? And why wouldn't that work for a brand, for an experience, for everything? Like
Yeah.
it's a no-brainer to some extent, but it's a thing that just because it's simple, it doesn't mean it's easy to execute, but also it doesn't mean that people don't forget it oftentimes. Brands forget it oftentimes and either want to talk about just themselves or, there is obviously the game of exclusivity and these ideas, but when it comes to a real immersion, and as you mentioned, the sort of tenets for maybe infinite games or the building of community in its truest sense, it does, I think, have to include that sort of inclusion as well as, the game of that. And one thing too that kind of just popped up is when we think about gamification, like it's become more of a dirty word, right? In terms of like the slot machine effect of apps, the sort of addictive tendencies of gaming, because again, we love games. Games are hardwired into our evolution, right? The hunt. And at the same time, as you put it, when we are faced with a challenge, be it to figure out what the next, witty thing is to say on that tweet, or how to make sure that our post lands on, the LinkedIn algorithm or Instagram or whatever it may be, there is this sort of like striving that is
I
like a
mean, real challenges, like you're not going to
right.
get dinner kind of challenge, or
Right,
more,
but
or
in
more.
our brain it all plays the same, right? And imagine like as you mentioned, putting that in the event, in the experience, those are the challenges that I think, as you say, get us out of ourselves so that we are not so complicit in being a part of sort of the kind of, you know, gross way of playing games. If you're more aware of like real games, real things, then these things become so much more like obsolete. Like I just turned the notifications or the color screen on my phone to black and white, and it's so weird, right? Like the thing that pulls you to your phone, the thing that gets us is like these colors, and again, back to Vegas, it's the flash, it's the light. When
I
this
love
is
them
black and
all.
white, the world looks so much brighter, right? Like we recognize, even if it's a hard situation, even if, as you said, how do we figure out how to survive this rain or make sure that this project gets completed? Like it's a real thing that is a lot more exciting, a lot more vibrant, even if it's tough in real life. So
One of
that
my favorite quotes is, "Without the darkness, the light would not shine so bright."
very true.
So we
That's
need
epic.
these juxtapositions, and we need it metaphor and truly, right? We need dark moments, we need highlights, we need challenges, we need the happy times because they help us understand each other in relation to each other and in relation to ourselves. So
1,000%. And with
yeah.
that, talking about challenges, how did you face and maybe what are some of like the challenges that you encounter regularly when it comes to like producing experiences? Anything that still surprised you, obviously in our world, like there's always something wrong, there's always a challenge to overcome. Anything that frustrates you that you see happening from a sense of like, why hasn't this changed? Or even how you adapt to sort of the ongoing or new problems that may arise.
Well, at the biggest, most metaphysical level, what's with all this paperwork? Sorry, just kidding. Thank you for this blessing of light. What's with all the paperwork? Um, there's this eternal challenge. It's just if anybody can figure out how to fix, this, people have spent careers trying to. It's always surprising me though, is how many people think that they can get extremely complex and complicated projects done like overnight in an
Hmm.
instant. I mean, things with lots of moving parts and a ton of collaborators and external parties. It doesn't matter if you're building technology projects or producing an event or designing an experience or doing a brand activation. Across the board, there will be some set of leaders who somehow feel like they themselves and their projects are not bound by the same limits of time and space as the rest of us
Right.
seem to operate, and And I've been on both sides. Okay, I've been on the implementer side. I've been on the decision maker side, and I've seen, people take a long and sweet leisurely amount of time to make their decisions or give approval or go back and forth. Meanwhile, a delivery deadline is not moving, and and so they get this nice spacious, time to come to conclusion, which is not as easy as I'm making it sound, but it sometimes is. And then the people who actually need to produce or design or deliver it, up to very high standards, have, this much everything to produce a miracle. Um, and but like everybody needs to get real. Like everything is going to take three times as long as you think it is, between lawyers, contracts, approvals, changes, deliveries, holidays, sick days, sick kids, Mercury in retrograde, like da 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 da. It's gonna take three times longer. Like one of the first rules as a project manager or director or anybody is, as soon as somebody's like, I need a week, in the back of your pocket, you're writing 3 weeks, right? So that is the ultimate universal conundrum. Some ways, I think you asked, how have I handled it? Every once in a while, if you get really lucky or have the right client or internal client or customer or collaborator or decision maker, um, and really is sob about it, you can find a way to make them a part of the project execution team, right? Like
Okay.
maybe they need to, not just from an overview site, but maybe they need to deliver a piece of content or participate in testing. Or I sometimes have double dog dared people to show up and work the gate or be a brand ambassador or come do an hour in the field, right? To see the thing actually happening. And it kind of helps permeate a little bit between the like on high white tower decreeing, decisions to having some fun, having some skin in the game, realizing, that they gotta snap to it and deliver or show up and be a part of the delivery of it. And I've found that can actually have some really profound moments. You can't always get away with it, but sometimes you can find people who are game,
Yeah,
and they'll appreciate it actually.
I like that. I like that. And
Maybe the next time they'll give you a little bit longer runway.
it helps them see. It could also backfire on you, right? Like of them actually being in the way when they can help, which again, all the intention is good, but something you said there too that definitely is. I wonder, have you heard of the six working geniuses, like the ideas around like personalities in the six working genius framework?
I think I have, but I definitely don't not familiar with it
So
right now.
there's
So,
supposedly like six different work types. Some of what we were talking about in the beginning of things that give us energy and things that drain us. But in a
hmm
project, and this is from a fable, right? The story is told as like this agency, and they figure out, okay, this is why the CEO is getting frustrated. And the CEO would do a lot of these things where he was an inventor, right? So the first two that are needed to craft an idea to begin a project is you need a wonderer and an inventor, right? So the person's going to ask the big whys. Well, why is this way and why is that? And then the inventor is going to come up with innovation, invent. But sometimes if they're only in those phases and not in the execution or in the completion stages, that's the beginning phase, they will do that, right? Like they'll create and in their mind, they're just inventing. They can't help. It gives them energy, but then when it comes to like the actual workhorses, right? You have like your enablers, the person who like gets it, loves to work, loves to just kind of be the workhorse, the helper, the provider, the executioner, and then the galvanizers, like the person that's like the driver. They like, hey, how are we moving on this? A lot of project management folks are galvanizers. And then the other two are like your tenacious folk. The tenacity
hmm
folks, the one that just wants to finish it. Once they begin something, they like to carry it through. And then the other one in the ideation, the execution phase is the reason, or almost like the person that they call it discernment. So it's the person that almost like will be almost a filter of like they have good taste. They may not specifically know a lot about programming, but they'll ask, well, why are we putting it this way? User experience. Like they just have this way of like having almost this wisdom of like questioning the things before they get executed. So in my understanding of that, it's like back to energy and how we work as a team. Sometimes from the top down, yes, it could be that they're so disconnected or just again, they have their own boss pushing deadlines on them, etc. But even at the top, the theory is that if these individuals can understand and have conversations with everybody that plays these different roles, understand where they're strong, understand where they're weak, understand where they're good enough, but they don't get energy from, those are like less likely to happen. These sort of like, here are all my ideas, make it happen, or here are why it's going to be, how and why it has to be executed by X deadline. So part of my thinking is, it'd be a thought experiment just to see how much of that request and just endless scope creep sometimes, can be coming from somebody who is, again, at this maybe inventor mode and doesn't recognize like the workhorse has these different contingencies and nuance that require that. And I think the solution of that, like getting them in there, helps maybe for that reason, right? Like maybe it helps them see like, one, I'm not into this, but they are, and so they should be doing it. But even if I get into this and I'm capable of it, like it's not realistic. Like there's physics, as you mentioned, and weather and sick kids and all the above that you called out. So
I mean, I wish, many work environments had the interest and the capacity and even feels like spaciousness enough for everybody participating in a project to even understand their work style and contributions. So I was supposed to go to a workshop this past fall, but I had to cancel. I can't remember the name of the type, but everything, Enneagram, astrology, all these different, how do you show up for work, kind of programs, like even to just sit around and be like, oh, who are you? What are you? What do you bring to the table? To me, I love that kind of stuff. I have to secretly find out people's birthdays and things. I don't care about the year, but I want to know, who am I dealing with here? Because then I
yeah.
know what their strengths are. I know where they might get stuck in things. I'll fully own my thing. And we're able to, be like, hey, can you come do that practical Virgo thing or whatever? But we so rarely do people want to, are willing to engage in that kind of, sharing and reflective and kind of that meta practice around
Hmm.
collaboration. Now, some people do that stuff and they just get stuck in meta, and that's a whole other podcast too.
Right.
They're just facilitating themselves all day long. You're like, get to the end where you actually are doing something. But I just love that. I mean, if groups were able to do that, where it's like, let's everybody put your cards on the table and then let's stack them in a way that's going to get us there. Like that would be fun, wouldn't it?
We got to figure that out. There's a nut to crack there.
When's your birthday?
Mine's May 9th. I'm a Taurus.
You're a Taurus.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
What are you?
Scorpio. Quintuple Scorpio, as a
Nice.
matter of fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's good.
me and Scorpios have a very interesting relationship. It's either amazing or it's tumultuous.
My Saturn's in Taurus, but so far you're okay.
Love it. Thank you.
Anyway,
So, with spinning into maybe like roles, what roles
yeah.
do you believe that various elements, these immersive experiences, these multisensory experiences, what do they play in creating the memorable experiences? Obviously, we talked about the demand from the public, but have you found anything that these technologies really, especially now with like what's developed, with Web3 and like this new world, has there been any newer discoveries on something that really resonates with people that maybe wasn't so clear before from these experiences, besides us obviously having multiple senses? What other value do you really find that has been maybe surprising within that sort of experience?
I mean, immersive technology, it's definitely a huge breakthrough, right? I mean, yeah, for me as a technologist, studying for a lifetime, literally, black screens with green words for far too long. I was like, finally, we're getting to the good stuff. Like, finally, right? But to immerse human beings, to envelop human beings in digital content, or to present 3D digital content like into our human spaces is such a powerful storytelling, information, absorbing, you know, environment. It's phenomenal. You can develop greater empathy. You can help have people very carefully witness scenarios that, they might not otherwise really be able, that were only an abstract concept to them. You can literally present abstract concepts to them, and now they, imagine watching sea level rise, and instead of it being a chart on a table in front of you, you're now watching something happen like around you. I mean, the power of it is just profound. And and I've gave some keynotes about how, some of these immersive technologies are some of the new blank canvases for humanity, and we're really still just getting our feet into it. But it's also a tremendous responsibility, right? A tremendous responsibility. Like, I mean, if something terrible is coming through me on my two screens, right? At least it's that box and I can put the lid down, right? And be like, oh, I don't want to watch that right now. But, the images, the ideas, the stories, the circumstances that we put people into in digital environments, um, it's incredibly important to be careful and to treat, to remember how sensitive and we as human beings are on every level when you're doing it. That's one reason I got into immersive tech, is after decades of helping to cultivate a civic and creative and but generally like good neighborly society out in Burning Man in the community. I was like, well, who's fostering the community and who's helping to shape how we get together in these virtual worlds? It's going to be gamers and porn people and whatever. Maybe something that I have learned over the years in all of these dimensions, is of value to then helping to define how we both act together in these digital spaces. And then now I'm really about the boundaries between the two. It's really fascinating, right? That edge is we're interweaving more and more technology and with our physical spaces. We've had these screens now for a long time, but now we're going well beyond the screen game now, and I think it's phenomenally interesting and also very important to use the right tools for the right thing at the right time.
That's so true. Yeah, that's a massive reminder. If we are creating, like any great tool, the power to cook the man or to cook its food, it is important to have folks who are spearheading it and who are deploying it in a responsible way. It almost reminds me of, like, obviously within the event space, we have a lot of waste, right? The stuff that gets used, the number of just non-renewable products. With both of those worlds, you mentioned, even like the immersive way of showing like actual sea levels rising and making a story and an immersive show of what world cancer as opposed to, global warming, like the stories and the narratives and the wordings that can carry a bit more depth and connection. Those ways of maybe multi-problem tackling, right? Like if it's what will waste at this festival do, for example. This is why we are opting for, I don't know, digital maps and apps instead of a physical map.
Hmm.
And part of the experience being this immersive story that for certain audiences in certain places, if the public were to complain or just see a loss of value in this quote unquote convenience being done, like let's say the paper or the plastic straws thing, and people were so upset about it, if part of the immersion was this experience that showed, again, a visual thing about what the benefit is of the straws, and even like obviously we want to play to people's egos at times, like just the virtue that they can have by being these great non-sea creature killers, right? Just something like that, where sometimes the same technology can build compounding tool or compounding solutions, but also, as you mentioned, like whether it's porn or any sort of like hateful or destructive or just not even completely evil, but just selfish or self-interested agendas that can also use and deploy this sort of power. It's important to have, I think, good not only people like you who are going to spearhead it, but have the conversations just like we have been having about waste. And I think that started to create, again, new solutions, new businesses. Have you found any sort of traction or ways? Obviously, you mentioned keynotes, but any other way that you have been able to move that conversation forward, or any, I guess, opportunities that you see to make that more of a actionable thing?
I do know some people right now. I've started working in immersive entertainment, right? So it's a broader, multi-dimensional category than just immersive tech. And I do know some people who are working to make, immersive, fun, beautiful, immersive experiences that also make a positive impact on cleaning up the oceans, mental wellness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's beautiful. And sometimes you can bring in like the immersive technologies, but now immersive technology is also you go into a room and the things that you would normally put a headset on, you can, as a group of people, can be in
There.
these real-time generated digital environments that are literally swirling a story and a narrative around you with you at the heart of it, also an immersive technology. So absolutely watching, literally was on a call today with somebody, who had a very successful immersive dining experience where they brought in ocean friendly food created by a chef, things that are perhaps that it's helpful if you harvest and eat as opposed to going after the things that are already scarce. And then had digital environments around that showed, here, this is, the underside of the mangroves, and here's these creatures, and here's what happens when, here's ocean plastic, moved people to tears and got them up the next day, and they showed up and did beach cleanups. Like,
Nice.
let's do that, right? Let's do
More
that
of
with
that.
everything we can, whenever we can, is basically my answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also been some community gathering ones, like going back to Burning Man, right? Deep in the pandemic, um, there was the Burning Man was canceled, and there was then it moved to 8 or 9 different metaverse, virtual platforms, which was unprecedented. I had left the year before to go work in immersive augmented reality. Everybody was like, "What?" And then the next year there was like almost 10
They
different
got
virtual
it.
reality Burning Mans. They're like, how did you? I was like, I don't know. But for us to be, and some of them were quite successful, and so to connect it was a completely alien environment, right? But yet it was entirely familiar. And then to know that a bunch of my friends were around the world with headsets, or could do it from their laptop, but then to be, uh, you know, in a space that we could hang out and share experiences. Like, it was a Burning Man where we could fly. I'm all in for that. And then at some point you look around and I looked around and I was like, it's my same people hanging around talking about the same stuff, except we're 1,000 feet in the air above some epic art project. Like, so how's the kids, It's just like,
That's so cool.
but yet incredibly healing, and for people to have that engagement and connection across time and space, at a time when everyone was really isolated.
Yeah.
That those kinds of opportunities. People get together and go to massive concerts in these virtual worlds. People spend hours and hours and hours in virtual game environments, and I used to be like, oh, they're just shooting stuff. I don't want to shoot stuff, right? No, no, they have all these side doors and hangout zones and conferences. It's like this online conference with all their buddies where they can go be free because they can't leave the room, right? Because they're, either isolated because of a pandemic, or they're 12 or whatever. Or they just choose to be there because they've got to develop a bunch of friends. So those things they can be wonderful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Community building components. I think that, yeah, there's definitely something there. And again, back to how does the individual play with it? How do the companies play with it? How do us as facilitators of it um, wield that responsibility? I think healthily. So, last question.
Mm.
What principles do you prioritize when you are in the designing or creation mode, or even in the production of these experiences that help you, ensure that the audience engagement is as optimal or as positive as possible?
Sure. I mean, I don't necessarily have them carved in stone, but maybe next time. But there's definitely some basics. I'd say, I mean, it's obvious, but like, do no harm, right? Do no harm. Treat each guest, visitor, participant, potential person who will drop by as if, they're a sacred being, because they are. And you want to make sure that, again, you're being inclusive to everybody, and that you're not in supporting one group or one message, that you're not, definitely not intentionally causing harm or making somebody else feel bad. Keep it simple, as another favorite one. We, as event and experience creators, we have these narratives and these tools and these gimmicks and these things, and we want to get so much done, and we want to see, we want to build on things, and we want to take people's on these journeys, and they're elaborate. It's like, just calm down. Like, there's only, like, if you're creating an immersive environment or an experience or an event for somebody, they've already had to go through a lot just to get there. If it's the first time they're being introduced to a technology or some kind of innovation, there's only so much that they can absorb. There's only so many messages they can absorb. There's only so many plot twists. Like, it's okay to actually take all that stuff and carve it into a bunch of chunks and then do a part two and a part three. Um, you know, Another favorite, you and I talked about this earlier, is give everybody a little breathing room, right? Like, some pauses, an opportunity for reflection or integration. If you're just in people's faces with message, it's like sometimes they need to, sit down and have a drink of water and talk with their friend about it. Sometimes they might just need to go, like, sit down and be like, oh, that really made me think. And too often we don't really leave spaces, like me talking real fast right now, but I got a few other points to make. Um, we talked about making the audience part of the story, right?
Mhm.
Inspiring them to participate. But you also got to read the room, and there's got to be levels to bring people in. Like, I just want to put my toe in, or I'm full in, right?
Okay.
And having different ways of letting people participate to their degree of comfort. We talked about having them work together. We talked about struggle. Okay, here's I think some of my favorite ones is give people permission to play, right? Just don't over architect their experience. Give them some things and see what they do with it. Like, you should have fun with creating what you're creating for them, and they should have fun with it. And if you've had fun doing it, and a little sense of humor and a couple little surprises, and you make a space where other people can have fun with it, like, everybody's gonna win.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
so good. So I'm gonna run it back. I'll highlight kind of what stood out for me and then fill in anything that I might have missed, okay? So I would start with nourishment and development within, as well as to the marketplace. I think one of the first points that really stood out is, as we were mentioning, for an individual on the self-development journey, the career journey, we evolve in our technique and our skill set, but also just developing what is obviously our mindset, our soul and spirit is the same, will have the same impact in the marketplace, right? So if you're developing your festival, your activation, as much as develop yourself, there's not always, but there's a correlative kind of growth in that. And a key part of that, which I think we did a full circle on, is creating that white space for oneself, right? Making sure that we are investing in the times or just recognizing the moments to slow down, to whether it's creativity or stillness, usually both, that help each individual recharge, not needing to be anything complex. As you said, it can be just setting the table instead of eating out of the paper bag. Taking the photography day, taking the unscheduled day is one of those things that, as much as you want to be, whether in your organization or in your private life, efficient and productive and a growth mindset individual, sometimes the best growth can come from that space.
Sometimes it's
This
good to play hooky.
That's right. That's right. And then the second point is, I think people want to participate, as you mentioned, as autonomous beings. They want to participate, not only being included, but being part of, the co-creative force, I would say, of an activation, and that being a win-win, right? Both for the experience producer and then for the participant. The third point
Let
I
me just
picked up,
add to that one, because I
yeah,
don't think we mentioned it. Look, a bunch of selfie stations does not make an immersive experience or a great event. Yes,
yeah.
people need a photo moment, but that's not enough to count as being co-created or part of the story. I'm just saying.
Facts, facts.
Yeah.
No, I think we do have way too many selfie experiences. There's a demand for that, and at the same time, it's like that's not what
One.
we're speaking about when it comes to fully immersion or
Yeah.
collaborative, right?
Yeah.
And to piggyback on that, I think the next point is a little bit related to that, which is collaboration with leveraging strengths of an individual. Again, this is more from like the team environment. If we can understand both our strengths, our weaknesses, as well as the others, how much better we can produce things. And I think in the same way, if we understand who our audience is very well, we can recognize ways that we can, maybe there's a certain type of audience that loves a lot more white space, right? As you mentioned, I think we all do sometimes a service. We can do a disservice by just blasting too much, lack of white space. But each audience is different, and sometimes understanding just how the individual has these strengths and these sort of re-energizing points, if we recognize the audience's points and moments of re-energizing and sort of energy depletion, we can create and co-create better. The next one I picked up on was the immersive technology, again, as a blank canvas and the powers of it that need to be wielded responsibly. And lastly, doing a service. As you mentioned, do no harm. I think we aspire to go a level above and actually do good, right? And an important, I think, a very simple aspect of that is simplicity itself, remembering that simple scales and fancy fails, right? Like anything that is going to grow big, even if it's simple, it'll eventually scale to complexity. And oftentimes we try to get fancy with it. And then as it scales, fancy turns into a wreck, right? So I love that idea of just fancy, no, simple, yes, it will eventually evolve. Anything else that you might want to throw in there that I missed?
No, I think that's a pretty good one. I mean, what I would add to that list of insights is also to remember to, we did say keep it simple, keep it small, but I think also building things incrementally and in modules, testing things out. Again, don't go for the full epic, most complicated production right off of the bat, but how can you add incremental things to it, see what works, and grow over time? A lot of people think they have to, go all the way to the biggest, baddest thing, right out the gate, and that's can be a recipe for disaster.
I love that. Thank you so much, Heather. Where can people learn more about you, plug in anything that you got going on? We can find out more.
Well, I'm working on things that are under wraps right now, but I
Okay,
do have a website, heathergallagher.me, with stories and pictures and previous works. And sometimes go visit all sorts of immersive entertainment experiences and do write-ups about them. So that's a good place
beautiful.
to find me, and then all sorts of links to other topics from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Looking forward to connecting again, and I appreciate your insight.
I appreciate you. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.